My name is Alexis Shapiro, and I am the trail director with the Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail. And I'm so thrilled to be here today to share with all of you about this really special project happening down in the southeastern corner of our state. Before we get started, I did want to quickly highlight a thank you to the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. We recently received some pretty substantial funding from the ENRTF, which is helping propel our project forward into the next phase, and I'll share more about that later on in the presentation. So a little bit about me. First of all, I should give you all a disclaimer. Today marks the end of my second week of employment with MDHT. So this is very much trial by fire. I've been thrown straight in, but this is a project that I've been connected with for a couple years now, and one that I've been incredibly passionate about because I love backpacking and I love the Driftless area. I am originally a California transplant. If you can't tell from my accent, I've been told I have a very obvious California accent from Minnesotans, which I think is interesting. I do have a lot of roots in the Midwest, though. My family immigrated here in the early 1900s. They landed in Iowa and have since spread out to Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin, and Nebraska as well. And then when my parents were in their 20s, they decided they had had enough of all the wintry weather. They never wanted to shovel a sidewalk ever again. So they packed up their lives and they moved down to San Diego. And then when I was in my 20s, I decided I had enough of all the beautiful, sunny, warm weather in San Diego, and I actually packed up my life and moved to Duluth. Quick funny story, I decided on Duluth because my partner called me one day and said, my mom used to take me birding in Duluth a lot, and I thought it was a really cool town. Do you want to move there? And being in my young 20s, I had no idea where I wanted to go, and I said, well, sure, that sounds like a great idea. So we moved up here, and I highly recommend choosing where to live based on where it's good to go birding, because I was not disappointed with my choice. I quickly fell in love with the Midwest and have never thought about leaving since. I could not believe how beautiful it was up here, all of the access to recreation right in our backyard, and I just really wanted to stay here and just really root myself in this community as much as I could. When I moved to Minnesota, that's actually where I started to develop more of a passion for recreation as well. Backpacking had been in my life for a while because both my parents are avid backpackers. But when I moved here, I started backpacking myself, first with a section hike of the Ozark Trail in southern Missouri, and then I thru-hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in 2017, and then did a solo thru-hike of the Superior Hiking Trail in 2018. And I've also hiked parts of the Ice Age Trail and countless local, county, and state park trails as well. I mentioned I've been connected with the MDHT for a while now. I first learned about the project in 2022. At the time, I connected with Marty Walsh, who's the instigator of our project. He was the one who really got this going. And he wanted to connect with me while I was working for a nonprofit down in Winona to see if we could get some folks who are connected in our community on the trail to help with volunteer projects and get the project moving a little bit further too. And to also just introduce the trail to me so that I could help advocate for the trail in our community. And I very quickly became an advocate because I was very excited by the idea of having a backpacking trail right in our backyard and really being able to showcase the beauty of the Driftless to other recreational users as well. A little bit about my work experience. I have been working in outdoor recreation since 2015. I got my start actually with Duluth Parks and Rec, working in their volunteer department and bringing folks out into the parks and on the trails to do different conservation stewardship work, and then working across agencies to develop various projects. From there, I moved on to managing a 180-acre camp property down in Winona and got to continue to do a lot of that program development work, but also a lot of that behind-the-scenes nonprofit work that I hadn't been introduced to yet. Fundraising, grant writing, budget management, things like that. And then from there, I entered a surprising world of nonprofit startups, not a world I ever expected myself to be in, but I've been working in nonprofit startups now for about 6 years, and I really love the work. Most of what I love is being able to do some of that strategic work with communities and really developing out our project and working towards accomplishing our mission together and building the strong community support for the project. So our vision is a 100+ mile backpacking trail across the driftless area of Minnesota in the style of the National Scenic and Recreation Trails, supported by volunteers and operating as an independent organization. I want to break this down just a little bit more to help us really understand what the vision of our project is. So first and foremost, the 100+ mile trail. We want to be the new long-distance backpacking trail in the southeastern corner of the state. Currently, there is not a long-distance trail over 25 miles in that region of our state, so this would be the first one. Backpacking, we're focusing primarily on backpacking and hiking. This is something that comes up a lot. There's a lot of other recreation users in our area who are very excited by the idea of having more trail, but they want it for riding horses or ATVs or cross-country skiing or mountain biking, and we're instead focusing very specifically on backpacking. It's a really low service area for us. It doesn't require nearly as much maintenance, and there's also just a huge need for it because we don't have as many backpacking hiking trails down there. I'm going to pause here on the driftless area because I want to explain what that means because I know some folks are unfamiliar with the term. First of all, raise of hands, has anybody been down to the Minnesota Driftless area, Red Wing down? Okay, great, awesome. Well, for those of you who haven't, I cannot encourage you enough to get down there. I think, and I'm a little biased, but I think it's one of the most beautiful areas of our state. The reason we call it the driftless area is because during the last ice age, the glaciation actually missed that whole area of our country. And so we don't have the same glacial drifts that you see elsewhere. And what that means is our topography is really characterized by these deep river valleys, these beautiful bluffs, and these hilltop prairies. And when we think about having a backpacking trail there, we really wanted to be able to highlight the driftless area and the beauty of that landscape because it is such a unique area. And the driftless actually extends down into parts of Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. So we are very much on the northern end of the driftless, and other parts of the driftless like to say that we're not driftless, but Minnesota Pride, especially down in southeastern Minnesota, we very proudly proclaim we are part of the driftless. When we say in the style of the National Scenic and Recreation Trails, we really want to help people envision the type of trail that we're looking to build. So sometimes people are thinking paved trails. We're actually hoping people will more so think of the Superior Hiking Trail, the Ice Age Trail, the North Country Trail when they're envisioning what we're trying to build. And then supported by volunteers and operating as an independent organization. So we are not a part of the DNR. We are not with a state agency. We are a volunteer organization. Up until last Monday, they didn't have any employees. Otherwise, we were completely run by a very passionate group of volunteers, and that's kind of the way we want it, because we want folks who are really rooted in the communities that the trail corridor passes through, and to really have that connection with the communities that we're serving. I want to go ahead and thank some of our supporters who've been with us along the way. Eagle Bluff Environmental Learning Center down in Lanesboro, Minnesota. They're our fiscal agents and have really helped legitimize us in the eyes of the rural communities that we're working in because they're so well known for the work that they do in the area. The Southeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership out of U of M Extensions have also been a really huge support. We will be building out listening sessions with them later on in the year so that we can continue to work in partnership with the local communities that the trail passes through. I've mentioned the ENRTF. And then I want to go ahead and highlight the Lost Creek Hiking Trail. In Chatfield, Minnesota, which is on the far western side of our trail corridor, they have an 8-mile trail called the Lost Creek Trail, and that group has been so supportive of our project from the very start, and eventually might actually become a part of the MDHT as well, which is really exciting. And then we've had a ton of support from cities and local governments and also conservation groups in the areas that we're working, and our kind of next step is to formalize those relationships so that we can continue to work with them as we build this trail. I also really quickly wanted to really quickly thank Lisa Locola and Matt Davis. Lisa from the SHT and then Matt Davis from the North Country Trail have both also been really supportive of the project and really helping us see that we're on the right track and that there's a demand for hiking trails in our area too, and that we're not working in competition with them, that this is really to benefit the state as a whole. Because we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, we do have a board of directors. I'm not going to read through everyone here, but I just wanted to highlight again at the top, Marty Walsh is really the instigator of the project. He's the one that got us going. And then we've been able to have a really supportive and passionate group of volunteer board members supporting the project along the way too. Each of them add a lot of different value to our crew, whether it's experience being in the area for a long time or different trail users. We have a lot of really avid hikers, runners, and then people who work in just various areas that we've been able to tap into to learn more about every area and facet of the project. I will say I'm not a tech-savvy person, so I don't know why that's there, but we're going to go back in time instead to 2018. So this project started in 2018 with Marty. He was working at the Fillmore County Economic Development, and he identified a need for more hiking trails. This was done in two different ways. One, talking to people in the communities, especially along the trail corridor. But two, he started to look at maps and just started to identify that we really didn't have a lot of hiking trails in our area that were long distance trails over 25 miles. In 2019, we started to begin work on building partnerships and identifying potential routes in Fillmore and Houston County. And then in 2020, of course, this project got put on the back burner as Marty transitioned away from the Fillmore County Economic Development to a different organization. Originally, this project was actually a part of his work in Fillmore County, and so at that time, we just put the trail on the back burner for a little bit, and then he privately reintroduced the idea in October of 21 to a smaller group of people who were just community members who wanted to see this project come together too. Down here to 2022, we received a lot of positive support in the local and the backpacking community and started to get a more formal organization established. And then Marty and a board member and a few others also completed a test hike in the area that we intend to have the trail just to see what it feels like to actually backpack through the Driftless region. In 2023, we incorporated as a nonprofit organization, and we continued to get an increasing amount of press coverage too through Minnesota Public Radio, St. Cloud Times. And then we also applied for the LCCMR grant, which I will talk more about later. That's the funding I referenced up at the top. Now here in 2024, we're beginning to work closer with the DNR to start to discuss formal agreements with them so we can move the trail into DNR land. We were awarded the LCCMR grant, $425,000 to hire a trail director, it's me, and then also start the progress of hiring trail consultants, purchasing equipment, so we can actually get the tangible work underway as well. So I mentioned that Marty had kind of started the project just by looking at maps. This is a map of the region the trail corridor, our proposed trail corridor will be in. And as he was looking at this, he was noticing that there is no long-distance backpacking trail which for 5 miles or longer. And this would become the closest long-distance backpacking trail for millions of people, including folks in the metro area, most of southern Minnesota, chunks of Wisconsin and Illinois, and almost all of Iowa. The yellow dots there represent town halls, and the green polygons are public land with the lighter green, let me see here, the lighter green is state forest and the darker green are state parks. And then the yellow polygons, there's not too many of them, but those represent wildlife management areas or WMAs. And we will have to route the trail around the WMAs because those are funded through the excise tax on hunting and fishing. And so any trails that, or anything that goes into those areas have to be for the conservation support of wildlife, which does not include hiking trails. But this has presented us with a really good opportunity to build relationships with one of the largest recreational users that are in the Driftless area, which are hunters. And so we've been really excited about that opportunity to work with hunters to ensure that protection and preservation of the land as well. And then here, with the addition of those lines, the black lines are paved trails, and the orange lines are dirt trails. We have a pretty extensive network of paved biking trails in southeastern Minnesota, and as Marty was doing the outreach process in the early stages of this project, he was connecting with communities like Chatfield, Spring Grove, and Caledonia, and learning from leaders in those communities that they felt like they had missed out on the push for the bike trails years ago, or just were simply never asked to be a part of it. And they really didn't want to miss out on the opportunity to be a part of a project now that would add more recreation to their communities. So here's our proposed trail corridor. It starts just east of the Chatfield area and then swoops down to the southeastern corner just east of Caledonia along the Mississippi River. An early supporter of ours who's a trout angler in the Winona area is a professional mapper, and he helped build out this map as well as a lot of our other professional maps that we use. And the reason why we have the trails swooping down to that southeastern corner is all about safety. So there's a lot of highways in this area that would be unsafe to pass over in different regions. And so we're actually trying to bring people down into those rural communities like Lanesboro, Spring Grove, Caledonia, where it's going to be safer for people to get across the highways. But it's also going to add a lot of economic value to those communities, right? Hikers love to eat. They're going to be passing through these areas. They're probably going to stop, get food, buy more supplies. And we've been seeing that the businesses in these areas really understand that support too. They've been wildly supportive of this project for a while now and are really excited about the idea of being able to bring more tourism to their area through recreation. I'm sure many of you might be familiar with this type of map of our national scenic trails. We wanted to show this really to demonstrate the type of trails that we're trying to emulate. And we also are hoping to extend the footprint of long-distance trails. So you'll notice there's a lot on the east end of our country. There's a lot on the west end, not nearly as much in the center there. And we really want to extend that long-distance backpacking trail footprint. There's a number of trails not featured on here, including the River to River in southern Illinois, the Ozark Trail in southern Missouri, and then the Centennial Trail in western South Dakota. Even though those trails are in the Midwest, they are still about 10 hours or more away from the Driftless region. So it's still quite a far distance. And the closest trail for us is the Ice Age Trail, which is still 2 to 3 hours away. So still quite a far distance for folks who live in that area who might want to backpack. So one question that at least I did not anticipate in the beginning, a lot of folks are very curious, what does a backpacking trail look like? I was kind of surprised to learn that a lot of folks are envisioning a paved trail, which is really not what we're going for. Our goal is to create a backcountry experience for folks, and that really begins with the trail that we build. On the right-hand side is a great example of what we're envisioning. It's a rugged trail that you know you're on when you're there, but if you're driving by, you might not notice it. If you're not aware that it's there, it's going to be an afterthought. You'll just drive straight by. We do anticipate that the trail will have a number of wet crossings. This is in part to save on the manual labor that it takes to build bridges, but we also plan to work with Trout Unlimited and the DNR to ensure that there's protection for the trout populations in those areas when there is a wet crossing. I had mentioned earlier that we'd been working with the Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. We had received a grant called the Empowering Small Minnesota Communities, which is helping us start to build out some standards for our trail. These were developed by Mel Bauman, who is an emeritus professor of forestry at the U of M. And he helped build trail standards for organizations like the Ice Age Trail, and then helped us with this as well. So in the wooded areas of our trail, our design standards call for 24 to 30 inch tread with a 4 to 5 foot clearing width, and then an 8 foot clearing height. Backpackers have backpacks that sometimes can be quite tall, and we want to make sure that trees aren't snagging on them as they're walking through. In other areas, not the wooded areas, our standards call for a 30 inch mowed path in the grass, obstruction free on logging roads or shared trails. And where we're trying to protect against ATV access, a lot more narrow trails, so they don't have that ability to move through. So when we talk about what the trail might look like, it might look like this, it might look like this, it might look like this. And this is actually a picture taken from the 2022 test hike, so this is an area that we're envisioning the trail might actually be on. It also might look like this, right? We need to bring people into towns, so there will be areas where we're just walking through towns on sidewalks. It might look like this, where you see farming gates. It also might look like this, where you're walking by tall cornfields. While we want to build a backcountry experience, we also don't want to hide what's there. A part of this project is really helping to highlight the beauty of the Driftless, and that means highlighting that we are also an agricultural place. There's a lot of cornfields, there's a lot of farms with animals, there's a lot of places where you might run into those gates, and we really want to make sure that those are a featured part of the trail as well. We anticipate in the beginning that there's going to be a lot of roadwalks and logging roads as well. And as we knock off bigger priorities on our project, we plan to reroute those areas so that they're in more natural areas as well. All in all, it just comes down to a matter of land access. We want to have a balance between getting people out on trail quickly while also giving them a quality wilderness experience, and that entirely depends on where we're able to achieve land access for the trail. I had mentioned the Lost Creek Hiking Trail earlier. This is just here so that I can remind you all, or remind myself to tell you all, that our website has a lot of information about where to hike in the Driftless. If you have not been down there before, you've never been hiking down there, I encourage you to go to our website and check out some of the trails that we have down in our region. And some of those trails may eventually become a part of our larger trail too. So it's a great way to kind of get a real life example of what the MDHT might feel like in a couple years. All right, so ideally, we want our trail to be a mix of state, local, and private land. In the next 2 years, we believe that we'll have about 30% of the trail on state land and 60% on roadwalks or public right-of-ways, and then 5% on both local and private land. And then within the next 10 years, we hope that that can slowly shift to have more state land and more private land and reduce the roadwalks. Again, this entirely depends on land access. We're working with private landowners to encourage them to provide us with easement agreements so we can build the trail on land rather than on roadwalks. And a part of that process is really convincing those landowners of the benefits of the trail. I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but one of the benefits is just that there's limited liability for Minnesota landowners who offer up recreational use on their land free of charge. We're hoping as we can start to build relationships with private landowners and show them the benefits of this project that we can get to that 50% and move away from all those roadwalks, because we know backpackers prefer to be in wilderness and not on roads. Just showing the trail corridor here one more time. And again, it's going to be just west of Chatfield. We're hoping to add that Lost Creek Hiking Trail into the mix, and then ending just along the Mississippi east of Caledonia. We have been very fortunate to receive some substantial funding support from two major sources. Our first is that LCCMR funding that I referenced up at the top. So that funding comes from lottery proceeds, and it's a $425,000 grant that we will have for the next 3 years. That grant supported us in hiring a trail director, and it also will support us in purchasing the equipment that we need to build the trail and to hire consultants who can give us an idea of where we should be building the trail and actually help us lay the foundation for that work. The second source of major funding for us has come from that Regional Sustainable Development Partnership Empowering Small Minnesota Cities. That's through the U of M extensions via the legislator, and it's mostly providing us with technical assistance. So it's helping us build out our map standards, develop our trail design guidelines, and then we'll be working with them to develop community input sessions as well. This is a grant that we haven't worked with quite yet. It's still coming up for us. But I just wanted to highlight really quickly that the Director of Extensions Tourism is on that grant committee and has been working with us. And they've been a very huge support in helping us connect with people who are supporters of the project so that we can continue to meet people who are excited about this project and want to support us to carry it out. And all of this work, especially the community input sessions, are really helping us position ourselves as a resource for the communities, which is really important to us. I mentioned this before, that working with the communities is something we really want to do intentionally. These community input sessions will help us learn from the community what their fears about the trail are, what their excitements are, and really involve them in the process too. We are always asked about trail amenities because backpackers, of course, need a place to pitch their tent, right? So we anticipate that there's already some existing public campgrounds in our area, and we anticipate that we'll be able to route the trail to those, or at least close to them, so that we can support those businesses too. This is sort of the unfortunate reality that does mean we will have some pay-to-camp spots. Some trails you can camp entirely for free. Some trails do have pay to camp, so it's not an untraditional thing that you'll see on a long distance backpacking trail, and it's kind of just the reality that we're working with what we have, and so that does mean that some spots you'll have to pay. However, we also have a lot of state forests, state forest land that allows for dispersed camping, which is entirely free. And we'll have areas going through that state forest land where folks will be able to camp. And then we'll also be working with private campgrounds and short-term rentals to build out partnerships to offer more opportunities for lodging as backpackers are moving through the region too. Trailheads are, of course, another important feature that we need for our trail. We will, at each of our trailheads, be providing parking, trail information, and emergency information too. And where possible, we actually want to route these into town and maybe have them at town halls or other major landmarks to, again, work in partnership with those communities and help highlight the features that they have there. Long term, we may need to work towards land acquisition just so that we can ensure that we have the space that we need to provide backpackers with the information they need before they get out on the trail. So being a landowner, this has become or will become a very big part of our work, is working with landowners to develop those easement agreements. It starts with a good faith letter of intent, and that's really just the landowner committing to being a part of this project later on, saying they would really like to work with us to have the trail come across their land. Next, we move on to a site visit and mapping. We're actually going to the site, envisioning where that trail might be, and actually figuring out what that route will look like. And then long-term access agreements. So this is where we're actually formalizing the partnership and building a 10-year agreement with the landowners so that we have the trail there. And if the landowner was to sell their property within that agreement, typically we retain our access for that land, and then the new landowner, when that contract ends, will have to renew that with us if they choose to. Then we move on to trail building or designation, actually laying the trail, and then public access. The picture here on the right-hand side is an example of the types of trail signs that we'll have available in these privately accessible places. So this is a part of the Lost Creek Hiking Trail, and it's owned by the Bailey family. They allow folks on their trail through a cattle pasture that they have. And so this sign is up on their property to let folks know not to trespass, not to deviate from the trail, and to just be mindful that they're recreating on privately owned land. I had mentioned that there's some benefits to landowners. In addition to that limited liability that I referenced earlier, they also retain their property access for logging or hunting, and there's a reduced risk of trespassing or poaching. Folks are probably less likely to go trespassing in areas where there's folks legally recreating. They're going to want to go somewhere where they might not find others. And so for landowners who are willing to give easement agreements, they may see a reduction in trespassing. It also helps protect the rural or remote characteristics of the land. And then supporting the quality of life. We know that we need people to move to these rural communities if we want them to survive. And a major reason why people move to rural areas is for the outdoor recreation that exists there. If we want people and don't want tons of government-owned land, sharing a little piece of our private land for trail access is a really great compromise. And then the entire time, the landowner maintains ownership, hunting access, and their working landscape. We never own parts of the land in the privately owned areas. That's still the landowners. They're just granting us access to use that land for hiking. All right, we're going to go through a loose timeline of our project for the next 10 years, and I really want to emphasize the word loose. This all depends on our trail partners, our volunteers, and land access, so while we hope this is the timeline of the project, it may change with time. Our first phase for the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to be designating trails on existing routes, working with the DNR, local trails, private landowners, and in-town routes. What that means is we'll see some minor trail building. So we're not anticipating these large-scale trails yet. We're just going to be working to build a little bit of trail to connect one part to another, and starting to identify the roadwalks too. And then within these first 2 years, the trail will be mostly discrete. You'd have to know that it's there. You'd have to know how to find it, not as accessible. In phase 2, we're hoping to start approaching additional landowners within our focus area, which I'll talk more about later on. And that's to help, again, convince them to sign on to this project and provide us with those easement agreements. We'll then work on building new trail to create a longer continuous path within our focus area. The hope here is for us to move from about 5 miles of trail to about 25 miles of trail. We're going to make improvements to long-term roadwalks. And then at this time, the hope is that our trail will be several grouped sections of trail. So rather than having these discrete sections that you really have to know about to find, you should be able to find a longer continuous path and know that it's there. And then the last phase of our project would be phase 3 for the next 5 to 10 years, continuing to work with landowners to close those larger gaps. That's where we're reducing a lot of those roadwalks and continuing to connect sections of the trail across our trail corridor. Creating reroutes on original trail based on use patterns. Improving our trail amenities, that's where some of that land acquisition for trailheads might come in. And then considering extensions. Folks ask us often if we would consider having the trail go down into Iowa or cross the river into Wisconsin. We are not there. We're very early on in our project, so we can't quite consider extensions into other areas. But around year 5 to 10, we want to start considering extensions into other areas of the Driftless that might be worth showcasing as well. And then at this time, we will consider the trail functionally complete, which for us means that a backpacker could go down to the Driftless, they could hop on trail, hike from point A to point B, and MDHT would never have to know about it, and they could safely get through their route without needing to call us. So our next steps for our project, onboarding the new director, it's happening. Our community listening sessions with MN Extensions, we're actually starting to meet next month to develop those. Finalizing our agreements with Minnesota DNR. This is a very exciting time for us. We're also starting to do that next month. So we're beginning our meetings with the DNR to see about the land agreements that we'll be building with them as well. And then we're going to be building out our focus areas per the LCCMR grant. I'll talk a little bit more about our focus areas in a moment. And then we'll also begin working on those private landowner extensions. We do already have some landowners who have signed letters of intent. We just need to continue to do that work to gather the amount of landowners that we need to really connect these sections of trail. So for our focus areas, here on the left, we have the Lanesboro area. That black trail is actually our Root River Trail, which is a paved trail, so it will not become a part of the MDHT. But in this area, we just need a handful more of landowners to be able to work towards that 25-mile section of trail. We already have a couple of landowners in this region who've signed on to be a part of the project. So we're focusing here first with the knowledge that it'll only take a couple more for us to get there and have a long-distance trail in this region. Next, we're going to be working down in the Caledonia area. In that area, we need about a half a dozen landowners. More for both would be better. It would help us reduce the roadwalks even more. But if we were able to get a half a dozen landowners in the Caledonia focus area, that represents a pretty significant decrease in roadwalks for us. So that's a really big priority area for us right now. We anticipate that if we're able to work on these two areas within the first and second phase of our project, that it'll encourage the landowners in between the focus areas to also sign on to the project because they'll want to help connect the trail and really get that full trail complete. So our ask for today, first and foremost, awareness. Awareness is super key for us. We are still working to spread the word about the project. I will obnoxiously talk to anybody who will listen about this trail, and that's kind of what we're hoping to build. Folks like me who are advocates for this trail and want to talk to people to get them excited about it and help increase the awareness of what we're doing in that area. Considering land access. We're used to giving this presentation down in the southeastern corner where there's a lot of landowners who are considering granting us land access. If you happen to be a landowner down in the southeastern corner or know of someone who's a landowner, introducing our project to them so that they can consider becoming a part of the trail is really huge for us. Again, we're still working to build out those relationships. We have a lot of people on our board and involved in our organization who are from those rural communities and who have been key in helping us connect with these folks, but we need to continue to raise awareness and connect with landowners so that we can get the easement agreements we need. Donations and merchandise. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit, which means that all donations are tax exempt. And even though I know I just put out that large number that we received in funding, all of that funding is earmarked for very specific things. So as we continue on in our project, we'll need to continue to fundraise and write grants to fund the other aspects of our organization that need support as well. So all donations go a really long way in supporting our organization, and purchasing merchandise also does too. We have a local guy out of Rochester who does all of our merchandise, and all of that money goes right back into supporting our organization as well. And then you can rep some cool MDHT swag. Volunteering is another way that you can get involved with us too. Right now we have a lot of volunteers who've been out mapping. They are not always hiking on designated trails. Sometimes they're hiking in their backyards on deer trails. And what that does for us is it helps us see kind of where these natural lines that people might want to hike are, where they're at, and then we can kind of connect them as we kind of lay out the framework of where the trail should go. So those volunteers who've been mapping have been really helpful for us. It's really giving us this inventory of areas that people can hike, and then when we get to the stage where we're actually laying ground, that'll be super helpful. Clearing and signage, both things that aren't happening right now, but in the future, if you are a person who likes to do that physical labor on trail, it's a really great way to get involved. We will be building trail a lot over the next 10 years, and so if that's something you want to do, come on down in the southeastern corner. We would love to have your help. And then events. We are starting to do more events now. We will be doing those listening sessions. We'll also be doing a lot of different community events across the trail corridor to help raise awareness about the trail. And we would love to have people there who are really excited about this project and want to talk to folks and get them excited about it too. So if that sounds like you, or if you know someone who might be interested as well, that would be a really great way to help us too. And then board of directors. So again, we are a nonprofit, so we have a board of directors. We're looking for local locals. So we often say you aren't local here until your grandparents are buried in the cemetery. Those are the types of locals we're looking for, because we're really looking for folks who are rooted in the community, who've been there for a while and have really deep community there, who can help us get connected with the right folks. You can find us online. We are on Facebook, X, and Instagram at hikemndriftless. And then our website, www.minnesotadriftlesshiking.com. I will say we are an entirely volunteer-run organization up until last week, so these things are not super active at the moment, but we do plan to be more active on social media and have our website updated pretty soon. So if you're an active social media user, that's a great way to stay connected with us and learn about updates as we go on. Then you can email us at mndriftlesshikingtrail@gmail.com. That goes straight to myself as well as Marty, the instigator of our project. And you can Venmo donations to us if that's something you're interested in doing at hikemndriftless. And again, all donations are tax exempt. I believe you may receive one if you send it straight to Venmo, but if that's not true, you're welcome to email me and harass me for a tax receipt. I think I moved way quicker than I was supposed to. This is a part of my California-ness. I talk very quickly, but that gives us plenty of time for questions. Before I do that, Lisa wanted me to say, let's see here, this is an evaluation for this session and not the conference as a whole. And so if you would like to scan the QR code to do an evaluation of the presentation, that would be great. And then later you will be emailed an evaluation for the whole conference. But in the meantime, are there any questions? Yes.
So I'm interested in the conversations you've had with some of the local community, what kind of reaction are you getting? Is it a positive reaction? Is there any kind of trend in food activities?
Yeah, great question. So we have been getting a lot of support in the area, and that support's really been coming from a wide range of folks. So businesses have been super supportive because they're excited about the idea of the increased tourism. There's also a lot of tourism efforts in the southeastern corner right now in general, and so tourism's been really, people who work in the tourism industry have been very excited too. We have been in communication with folks at the DNR who've also been very excited about the project, and other state agencies and conservation groups who've been seeing this as a need for the community and want to help us figure out how we can get there. As far as the rural communities go, we've also been seeing a lot of support there. I had mentioned earlier that the local governments had kind of spoken to feeling like they had missed out on other recreation pushes in the past. And so there's a huge excitement by these local communities to be a part of this project and be able to bring that recreation down to their areas too. The only defector I've heard of course there's always at least one, but in this case I've only been told about one, and it's just a person that you'll often see on our social media accounts asking if the trail can be a horse trail. Unfortunately, there's already a lot of horse trails down in Winona in the southeastern area, and so that's not something we're looking to do. But we haven't been hearing from other folks that they're not interested in the recreational use of the trail. Mostly, we've been hearing a lot of excitement from folks to see something like this in that area. Oh, landowners, yeah. So at least with the landowners that we've worked with, we've been seeing a lot of support. Seems obvious, right? They're connecting with us because they want to give us that access to the land, so we would hope they'd be excited about it. But we haven't been hearing from landowners that aren't excited about the project, which is a part of the reason why we anticipate that as we build out these agreements, the ones that are in between in our focus areas will want to sign on to the project. Yeah. Yeah, so I might not have the best answer, but honestly, just from the time that I've been connected with the project and from what I've been hearing since working for the organization, they haven't had a lot of experiences like that yet. I'm sure there has been mistakes made, as we are human, we're liable to make a lot of mistakes. But from what I've been hearing in the area, there's been a lot of intention put into building relationships with people in this project. We recently actually, did anyone hear about the Driftless National Park project? Yeah. So we did connect with the person who had that project underway. They were trying to build a national park down in the Driftless region. They did not do a lot of that community outreach work in the beginning to really build those relationships. And so when that project went forward to kind of, see whether or not it was going to come to fruition, it got shut down very quickly. Since then, we've been hearing from folks in the community that they see our project very differently. They're seeing our effort to get into the community, to have people recognize our faces and see us as, in these communities rooted residents who live in these places, people who own businesses. So we've been able to connect with a lot of people and be really slow and intentional with the process, which we just see as a necessity when you're working with small rural communities that maybe aren't used to as much change. So far, no. I'm sure there has been some at some point in time, but fortunately we've been moving slow enough to not see any huge major defections or animosity towards the project. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So Marty, from the very start, has been talking to anybody who will listen. He has done a lot of outreach in the community. That's part of the reason why I first got connected with Marty. I was working at a nonprofit that did outdoor-based work. And at that time, he was just cold calling anyone in our region who does outdoor work, who might have an opinion about the trail. And really his objective was to hear from anybody who he wants to hear from everybody. I heard him say he wants to connect with people who don't like the trail so that we can hear why they don't like the trail and better understand what their thoughts and opinions are. So that's been a huge effort on his part, is just that one-on-one connection with nonprofit leaders, businesses, local government. And then he has also been doing events. They did at Eagle Bluff Environmental Learning Center, they did this bluff dinner event where they had, I think, 100 people from the local community show up to learn about the project. That was a fundraising dinner for us, so it helped bring in dollars, but also helped connect us with a huge amount of people in the area. And they've been doing smaller events like that too. Just last week, we were in Chatfield doing a presentation to a group of 15 people who are part of this lifelong learner group. And then today, he's down in Rochester doing a presentation to a climate resilience group. So we're really taking every opportunity we possibly can to introduce this project to people, because we see that as an important first step to making sure we get where we want to go with the project. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I think there's a balance to be had. I've been learning. We want to talk about the trail as if it's already a thing so that people are excited about it. But we also don't want to be so bold as to say this is already happening and you have to sign on to it because it's already happening. So we've been finding a balance. And I know when Marty and I talked back in 2022, it was, this is a project we are trying to do. It wasn't this formal thing that I envisioned was already in place. It was a thing they were working towards. But now that we've been about, let's see, it was 2019 that the project started, so about 5 years in, they're starting to reframe the way they talk about it to locals to help us see that this is a project that's been happening for half a decade now, and we're at the next stage where we can move a little bit more forward. So now they're talking about it a little bit more as, yes, we are already here. Any other questions? Yeah.
How do businesses get involved? What is like, do you have corporate kind of relationships, sponsorships? Like, what kind of get?
Yeah, so not yet. We don't have like corporate sponsorships or anything like that. Most of our work with businesses is just working with those small rural business owners. So we're developing out partnerships with them that mostly look like, you know, do you own a campground in the area? If so, do you have some land that we can maybe like reroute the trail to so it goes straight to your campground and you can have new customers coming through each month? Working with local restaurants to introduce the trail to them and help sell the story of why this would be a beneficial asset for their community. So we haven't been doing a lot of those like bigger pushes for like financial support from businesses, more so figuring out how can our trail be a support for these businesses, and then how can we help like tell that story to them so that they can become supporters of the trails as well. And honestly, from what I've been hearing, that's actually been very successful so far. A lot of these smaller communities, especially the Lanesboro, Spring Grove, and Caledonia area, Spring Grove particularly has been trying to increase their tourism. So these are communities that are really understanding the benefit of having more folks come through, and those businesses, a lot of these really small businesses are getting very excited by the idea. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Are you guys viewing this as a regional destination? Is it, you know, a spot like the SHD, which has gone from being a spot that draws people from all across the country? And how are you visualizing how this trail will be used and things of this nature?
Yeah. So we imagine in the beginning that it'll probably see maybe about 100 users a month. So not a huge number. We're definitely not contending with like what the Pacific Crest Trail does, where they have to do permit systems because they have so many users that want to be on that trail. We anticipate in the beginning it might be a little bit smaller. But I think over time, especially because, you know, highlighting that this is the only long distance trail that will be in the Driftless region within a 2 to 3, this will be the closest trail for millions of people, that this may become a regional asset, and specifically one that's just highlighting the Driftless region. We don't want to be in competition with the other trails around us. We're so fortunate to have 2 really incredible backpacking trails in our state with the Shapiro Hiking Trail and the North Country Trail. So we want to just be able to add to that by saying, here's another area of Minnesota that is beautiful and deserves to be backpacked through. And if that means that we can, you know, get people from other states to come in and see that and experience that too, that's great. I do anticipate that'll be a slow push though. Yeah. Thank you. Is that another hand? Yeah.
Thanks for bringing this up. My name is Carl. I work with the U.S. Forest Service in Gilead and the North Country Trail. And you mentioned Matt Davis, so he's going to have some great ideas of what's taking to move a long trail across the landscape. It's quite easy when you're on federal lands. You know, we're doing a North Country Trail just outside Gilead right now, which brings me to the trail town. So, and I grew up in southeast Minnesota. I think you have a niche there in the Driftless area. You know, it won't be competing with, but it will be another like location to hike. We have a couple farms right there at Black Hammer and Spring Grove, so I know you're gonna find some roadblocks with land ownership, but I think you'll find some really good routes also. So I'm optimistic. But the trail towns like Spring Grove, I mean, yeah, that's a slam dunk for. And with designated trail towns, you might get those town hall meetings that and get ask the landowners what it is most successful to do. So good luck. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of elaborating on the trail town thing, has there been any discussion about trail culture within the town to pass through? Because I know on certain long distance trails, like the term hiker trash was created by hikers because
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm really glad you brought it up, but the answer is no. We haven't had those conversations yet, or at least that I'm aware of. Again, very new to my role. But I will say, when I was applying for this position and considering taking this position, I was really thinking a lot about the trail culture because that's something that I care a lot about. My background in the last couple years has been in the inclusion side for recreation. The organization that I founded worked to strengthen the outdoor community, but also increase accessibility and make the community feel a little bit more welcoming to outdoor recreationalists. And so that's it's a personal passion of mine and one that I think will be really important because I think culture is really important. It's important to feel like you belong. The outdoors is a great place to feel a sense of belonging. And so we're hoping, at least I hope, that as this project continues, we can really build those relationships with the community to help build a culture that feels really welcoming and accessible so that especially people who you don't historically see included in the picture of outdoor recreation feel safe to be in these rural communities. So yeah, definitely something I want to push. I'm not quite sure how to do that yet, but fortunately I feel like I have a lot of resources to other folks who work in recreation who can hopefully help us figure out how to do that successfully. Yeah. Do you have a thought on that? Yeah, please. Yeah. She's been helping us with the process.
So first off, my name is Xinyi Qian. Can you all hear me? And I'm the director of the Tourism Center, which is housed within Extension. And I've been working with Marty, knowing that, again, she's only 2 weeks old here on this position. And so obviously the conversation with Marty started way before she was hired. And so my Extension colleagues and I have been discussing with Marty in terms of the whole welcoming piece, which she already used the word herself, right? So this is all aligning really, really well. And in Extension, we specifically, the center is in the Department of Community Development. And in community development, a very important aspect is leadership and a civic engagement. And so the civic engagement part of it is, very much about welcoming communities. And so this whole concept around, more than a concept, obviously, being inclusive, sense of belonging, and accessibility. These are all within that umbrella, and welcoming communities, although we call it a program, but that kind of initiative really aligns with, the question that was asked and what Alexa just talked about. So although it sounds like, we cannot get everything done in 2 months, and yet it is definitely on the radar and a part of the, reasons or say purposes and goals of doing these community input and listening sessions is not only getting their input, not only getting their hopefully sign on and a buy-in, but also that's the subtle starting point of building welcoming communities because some of them are not used to having visitors. So with that, hopefully that's good information, and thank you for letting me steal the thunder for 2 minutes.
Any other questions? We have just a couple minutes left. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. And I was only working part-time the last 2 weeks, so thank you for being kind.
No, it's really, really impressive with how much you've come to know about this. And I'm curious, in terms of state parks down there, it almost looks like the route that you selected, kind of what your state park is
Yeah.
there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And actually, I'll go back to the proposed corridor so we can look at that real quick. And this is, you're going to see a little bit of my lack of awareness of maps. I honestly cannot tell you where the Whitewater State Park is. I'm guessing it's this area? It's even, okay, yeah. So, oh, perfect, yeah. So way up there, we have a state park. We also have a state park along the river, too, that's more up north, too. But yeah, the plan is to not go through those. I'm not really sure if there was a reason why. I just know that this corridor that they proposed, it had to do with getting us connected from the Chatfield area over to the south, and then having those safe crossings and bringing us through some of the rural communities that felt like they had missed out on recreation opportunities before. And even thinking now about what's between Rochester to like the Winona area, I don't know that there's a lot of towns in those communities that have been having the same sort of like recreation push.
I feel like that would be stay south of I-90 and kind of link these smaller, non-Rochester communities. Yeah, there is definitely, I know some of the officials from these towns, that they were vehemently opposed to being part of the river trail system when they came out. So they're trying to
I like that. Okay, I maybe have time for one more question. Yep.
What other kinds of funding might
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is one that I don't have a great answer for. I will say I do have a pretty extensive background in grant writing, and so I'm sure that grants will end up being a pretty big part of the funding push that we go for, and donations as well. But I am imagining that we're going to be pushing for like state and federal grants, whichever ones are available, and that's not something I know too much about. But if you wanted to learn more, I'd be happy to get your contact information after and connect you with somebody who would be able to answer your question more fully. Yeah. Do we have time for one more? Nope. Oh, Adam's saying yes. Adam's telling me I have time for one more question. Yeah.
So I love the Victoria area. I love the Driftless. It's kind of my home away from home. So I'm saying to you, we had a board member from Victoria. So I know on the description for the time today, you said that it would be, open to all. So what does that really mean? And if you're looking for, some mobility devices, open to all ages, open to all experiences, like what kind of promotional things are you going to do so that people in my community know that they can enjoy certain parks safely and what maybe are not a safe option and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So this is another question that I wish I had more information, because accessibility is incredibly important to me, and so that's something that I think needs to be discussed. The only thing that I can say to that right now is that I think with the intention of bringing the trail through town, we really are hoping for an accessible trail that can encourage a lot of people to become backpackers or become hikers. And the trail will be an entirely dirt path trail, so with the right accessibility equipment, people should be able to use the trail. But I don't quite know, is it going to have a lot of elevation gain? Is it going to be too narrow for dirt trail wheelchairs? There's probably a better word for that I'm not thinking of in this moment. But that's certainly something that is important to me that I want to pour more attention into, and I would love to get you connected with somebody who maybe has a better answer, who's been involved with the project for longer than 2 weeks. So if you want to come up after, I'd love to get your contact information. Make sure you get connected with somebody too. Great. Okay. I think I maybe, I have time for one more. Yes. What was that? Oh gosh. Okay. Does anyone not know what a trail name is? I love that this is an easy question. So my trail name is Bonsai because I'm strong like a tree but too short to be a real tree. I got that at like mile 250 on the PCT back in 2017, and I deeply love my trail name. My partner is actually here as well in the back corner being a supporter of mine. He hiked the PCT with me. His trail name is Bighorn because he hikes up hills way too quickly like a bighorn sheep. And I could not keep up. Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. If you have questions, I'll be around for a little bit, but otherwise I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.